everybody, welcome to Vlogmas Day 5. This is going to be a little bit different of a video than you have seen so far for Vlogmas, which is normally our sort of montagey day in the life Vlogmas videos. The reason I'm not doing that is because nothing really happened today that is worth filming. I had my normal day at work, it's just a normal Tuesday, and I have nothing festive planned for tonight. So there's really nothing interesting for me to show you. So I thought instead what I would do is make a video that I was going to make before Vlogmas started, but I got off track and it didn't happen. And that video is going to be a combination of the books that I am most anticipating reading at the moment, and also some of my favorites list of stuff from 2023. Now I gotta admit, 2023 has contained the biggest and longest reading slump that I have had in recent memory. It's not unusual for me to only read 4 or 5 books in a year as an adult. I'm really busy and I have not always prioritized reading, but I wasn't expecting that to be the case this year because I had such a great reading year in 2022. I read 20 books. I know for some people that's like the amount of books they read in a season, but for me that's a lot. And I was expecting 2023 to be kind of the same, but instead I only read 4, maybe 5 books, and so far none of them have really grabbed me. The one that I liked the best was The Hobbit, and that was a book that I was rereading for the 2nd time, so it was my 3rd time reading it, and so I knew it was going to be good. So I've made a list here, a stack of the 8 books that I am most interested in reading right now, the ones that I'm most going to prioritize getting to. So I'll take you through what is actually interesting me right now. So the first book on this list is actually tied to the book that I am reading right now, which is A Restless Truth by Freya Marske. Freya Marske's first book in the Last Binding trilogy, A Marvelous Light, was my favorite book of 2022, and I have procrastinated reading the 2nd book in the trilogy for a full year now. I have actually read a good amount of it on sort of metro rides and car trips, but it's not interesting me as much as the first book, but I still think if I can actually sit down and finish reading it, I think it will still be a hit. But then the first book on this stack is the 3rd and final book in that trilogy, which is A Power Unbound. This just came out in November of this year, November of 2023, so I had pre-ordered my copy, and as soon as I finish with the 2nd book in the trilogy, I am looking forward to reading this. In case you don't remember from previous videos, these are queer romance in a magical setting. I think it's sort of Edwardian magical setting, and it contains a mystery surrounding what's called the Last Contract, which is a series of magical objects, or one magical object broken up into pieces, which if those pieces are reunited by people who mean harm, they could cause the end of magic everywhere. So I'm looking forward to reading this. The next book is also one that I've read a good chunk of already and just kind of need to finish. I brought this book with me on our trip to Massachusetts this past summer, and probably read about 2/3 of it on the trip. But the problem with me and my travel books is that if I don't finish them over the course of the trip, they will then languish in this like 2/3 read state for probably months and months. And that's what's happened with this one. I was reading it in July and it is now December and I have not finished it yet. I just sort of abandoned it. That book is The Queer Principles of Kit Webb, another queer historical romance. This one is about a former thief who now runs a coffee shop in this English town, and he meets a aristocrat who is trying to obtain an object of importance to him from his not so great father. So they end up working together to try and retrieve this object that is going to prove the horrible things that his father has done, and obviously along the way they fall in love. What I've read of it so far is very good. It's very tropey, but that's not a bad thing, and I am looking forward to finishing it. I just need to sit down and do it. It's going to be such a quick read once I actually do it. I'm thinking maybe this might be, if I can finish my other couple books, that this might be a good winter break read just to knock it out while I have a bunch of free time. I've been meaning to read this next book for a few years now. It's The Magicians by Lev Grossman. I have a mostly love relationship with the TV series, The Magicians, that this is based on these books. I say mostly love because there were some events around the end of season 4 that a lot of the fandom got really upset about, and I did not think they were good choices, and then in season 5 it went kind of downhill. It's not a coincidence that, from what I understand, that is where the show starts to really significantly diverge from these books, including the fate of the protagonist is very, very different. But because I have been so obsessed with the show, and because the protagonist of this, Quentin Coldwater, is one of my favorite TV characters of the last few years, I've really wanted to read these books. I've also started this one. I brought this for silent reading with my classes back in September or October, and I really like the way that he writes. Even though there's some differences from the TV show, I think my love for Quentin Coldwater and the interest of this universe is really going to get me. This is also a trilogy, so there are 2 more books down the pipeline after this if I like this one. You might be noticing that the name of the game with a lot of these recommendations is either queer romance, fantasy, or both. And I just want you to know that I am going to continue on that vein for all but one of the books on the stack. Continuing with Babel by R.F. Kuang. I have got this last year, and this book is probably one of the books I am most excited to read out of any book. This is a book that became super popular when it came out last year. It is a meditation on the power of translation and the dangers of translation and the dangers of how colonialism takes over things that are inherent to other cultures and manipulates them and monopolizes them. And it's done through this fantasy world that has an interesting relationship with translation. I can't explain any more than that because I haven't actually read the book. I've previewed it, I've looked at the first 30 pages, they are incredible. I think this is going to blow my mind. It's supposed to be a very complex read and a very difficult read. Not just difficult because of the subject matter in terms of emotions, but also in terms of just the themes that it explores. But I feel like this book is going to be really life-changing for me, and it's been a long time since I've had a book that I not only liked, but that really sort of influenced me in that way. I am so excited to see what's in store in this book. But you can see it's not short, and as I said, it's not easy, and right now that is preventing me from picking it up. Being in a reading slump like I am, I feel like I keep wanting to go for things that are shorter, that are faster, that are easier. But at the same time, maybe that's not what I need. Maybe I need something like this that's really gonna grab hold of me and refuse to let go, even if it takes me a while to get through it. Next up on the list, we have 2 books by Aidan Thomas. This one I started reading back in like 2020. Cemetery Boys is probably one of their most well-known book, and my sister just read this. She loved it. It's a sort of spooky book about a teenage boy, a trans boy, who is trying to get a ghost to pass on into the next realm, because that's part of the tradition that his family is a part of, is that they can communicate with ghosts and help them to pass on. That's their role as sort of caretakers and guardians. And because he is trans and the role of this sort of usher into the next world is male dominated, his community doesn't see him as being able to do that, and so he's proving his own masculinity and his own right to that identity based on this. But it backfires on him. This is not a spoiler, this happens in chapter 1. It backfires on him, and instead of him helping this spirit cross over into the next world, he summons a different spirit than he was intending, which is the spirit of a teenage boy who does not want to cross over. and he becomes embroiled in the mystery of how this boy passed away, and feelings start to develop, and it's just supposed to be such an excellent book. The other book by Aidan Thomas that I have is The Sunbearer Trials, which is a much more recent book. I believe this came out last year, and this is about a competition. I'm going to look at the description a little bit. It's a competition called the Sunbearer Trials, which has to do with demigods. And we have Teo, who is a 17-year-old demigod, also trans, lots of trans representation in Aidan Thomas's books. And there's this big competition that goes on that he is involved in. I don't know as much about this one. I do have both of these copies signed. You probably can't see that because it's written in, like, gold pen. But both of these copies are signed. I met Aidan Thomas at an event last year. And this one is also supposed to be very good. It has very good reviews. It's actually so funny that this next book is on my list, because I was actually talking about this book in class with one of my students today. It's Wednesday, so we did our silent reading, and one of my students is reading Terran Wanderer, which is the 4th book in this same series by Lloyd Alexander. And he was appalled to find that I have read the lesser-known series by Lloyd Alexander, Westmark, and I haven't read this. So the book is the book of 3 in the Chronicles of Prydain by Lloyd Alexander. This is his more famous series of books. I believe it's 5 books. But I have not ever read it, despite loving Westmark, which is, like I said, the sort of lesser-known trilogy. Apparently this is based on Welsh mythology, according to my student. The Westmark series, as I've said in previous videos, is more like Les Miserables for middle grade. But I love Celtic mythology and Welsh mythology and any of that kind of stuff. And this is a very quick read, middle grade, like 150 pages. I feel like if whatever magic is in the Westmark books is anywhere in this, which given Lloyd Alexander's talent, it probably is, then I'm probably going to adore these. This is probably one of the ones I should go for most immediately, because they are quick and they are easy to read, and there's 5 of them, so if I get into it, I can really get some momentum going. But I'm almost nervous, I think, because if I don't like it, I'm going to be so sad. And last but certainly not least, we have The Bear and the Nightingale by Catherine Arden. This is based on folklore, I believe Russian folklore, and it also has a little bit of fantasy in it. I don't know much about this one. I just know that it's sort of winter vibes, so I feel like I should read it this winter. I have honestly wanted to read this for a few years just because the cover is so beautiful. Honestly, that is part of what is attracting me to it. Also, I've seen probably over a dozen people recommend this on TikToks and YouTube videos and Instagram. I've seen it in a bunch of places. So I have a feeling that this is going to be good, and I believe there's a sequel to this one as well, if I like it. By the way, the tea that I'm drinking while I film this is a Ceylon tea from my tea advent calendar, and it is quite good. I thought I'd leave you with a couple of other favorites from 2023, the things that I have been most obsessed with this year, which is a kind of shorter list than it usually is. I didn't have a favorite book really this year. Like I said, I had a lot of books that I found kind of underwhelming. I also didn't watch very many movies. I watched hardly any movies this year that I haven't seen before. So I don't really have a favorite movie of this year either. I kind of have favorite TV shows, but I'm not caught up on maybe even a single thing. I'm not sure I'm caught up on a single TV show that I'm currently watching right now, including things like Ted Lasso and Our Flag Means Death and Good Omens. All of these shows that had new seasons this year and are historically some of my favorites. Mythic Quest I'm not caught up on. If you haven't seen Mythic Quest, it's amazing. It's on Apple TV+. Go see it. Go watch it even though I'm not caught up on season 3. But 2 things that I have really been obsessed with this year. My Spotify Wrapped called me all the way out. And I could have predicted this from a mile away, which is that my favorite band of this year was a symphonic metal band called Orion's Reign. I don't know if anybody really has heard of them. They are not like a high-profile band that I'm aware of. But if you watch really closely a video from last Vlogmas, you'll see a brief shot of my phone where I'm listening to that song and listening to a song, sorry, let me rephrase, listening to a song from one of their albums that I stumbled upon by accident and saying, wow, I heard this song a couple days ago and I really fell in love with it. Well, that love relationship with the song and the band continued all the way through the year. I listened to them probably 5 times as much as I listened to anyone else, and I loved it, and I would suggest that if you like symphonic metal in any way that you check them out. But the real winner of 2023, the one thing I discovered this year that rose to the level of an obsession that you kind of make into your whole personality, was none other than Critical Role. Critical Role is a very famous Dungeons and Dragons, like tabletop RPG stream. It's a group of people who play Dungeons and Dragons, and they've been around for almost a decade, but I only just discovered them this year. I discovered them in February. Basically, the way that I got to this was I was, as you might remember, really into The Last of Us. And I had sort of gamed my TikTok algorithm to show me a lot of videos about The Last of Us. And then we started getting into spoiler territory, and I needed to reverse course, so I stopped engaging with those videos. But what the algorithm does is when you start to lose interest in something, it starts to pivot and suggest other things that are related to that you might be interested in. And Ashley Johnson is a voice actor who is in the Last of Us video game and appears in the Last of Us TV show, and is also a player on Critical Role. So clearly the algorithm thought maybe she'll like this and directed me to it. And it just so happened to come at a moment when I really needed some kind of obsession, because I discovered this right at the moment that I discovered that I was going to have to transfer schools, and I was so anxious and so stressed, and I really needed the comfort that Critical Role ended up providing me. I didn't actually know very much about Dungeons and Dragons at all until this year. Probably the most I could confidently tell you prior to watching the show was that it was a tabletop role-playing game. Tabletop meaning that it is played on or around a table, and role-playing game meaning that at the same time as you are playing strategically the mechanics of the game, you are also embodying a character. That was all I knew about Dungeons and Dragons. If you'd really pressed me with like leading questions, I could maybe have told you a couple of other things. Like I could have told you that a D20 is good if you had prompted me, or maybe I could have named like one race or one class. But again, I would have needed a lot of prompting and I wouldn't have been confident. That was the only thing I knew about Dungeons and Dragons. I know quite a bit more about D&D now, obviously, from watching the show since February, although I'm still relatively a novice in terms of what I know and I don't have any hands-on experience. Although, who knows, maybe that's something to try in the new year. But I did grow obsessed with this show, obsessed with the group of people who play it. They are people who got their start in voiceover acting and were largely famous for that, but now are mostly well known for playing this game on this like actual play stream. I am engaging with the show in a fairly chaotic, disorganized fashion, which you kind of have to, honestly, at this point, because every single campaign, which is sort of like a season for this show, most of them are they run for about 2 years, because they're playing it once a week. And D&D sessions, so like each individual episode, is like 3 hours or more long. So we're talking thousands of hours of content before you even get to like the special one-shots and the behind the scenes and all of the other things that they've created associated with this show. So you can't really start from the beginning because it would take you years to get caught up, even if you were watching it every day. So what I've ended up doing is I am watching Campaign 2, which is called, the group that it's about is called the Mighty Nine. I'm watching that on YouTube, like the video of that. And then I'm also watching the current campaign, which is Campaign 3, the Bell's Hells group. I'm watching that one live as it airs. So I started in the middle of the season. I started with like episode 58 or something like that. At the same time, up until recently, I was listening to Campaign 3 from the beginning in podcast form. So I've got like 3 stories or 3 sections of story going on at the same time, and I've spoiled myself for like so much of the rest of it. But I don't even care, because like I said, it's going to take me, I feel like I'm going to be doing this for decades and still not be caught up. So I don't really mind spoilers because, you know, what used to I have for that one, it's going to take me so long to catch up. But I am loving it. You'll probably see me in my next video watching the live stream because it'll be a Thursday. I make a little blanket nest, and usually I fall asleep while watching it, and then I catch up the next Monday when they release the episode. So that has been the saving grace of my sanity in this incredibly, like, disengaged, tumultuous year that I have had. This has been that one consistent thing that I have fixated on, and it has brought me comfort when I really needed it. Additionally, they have, like I said, other shows that are associated with the company but are about different storylines that are not Dungeons and Dragons. They've released a sort of new game in a new type of world, and it's called Candela Obscura. It's sort of cosmic horror, like H.P. Lovecraft style. And they just started the 3rd circle, the 3rd campaign of that, and I have finished listening to the first 2 campaigns, and they are well worth listening to. They are an emotional roller coaster, but they're really good, and I would highly recommend them. Alright, I can tell that I've talked for a really long time. I'm not even sure how long. And I do have other stuff to do tonight. It's not filmable. I have just basic like daily habits tasks like reading a news article, practicing my Irish, which is the language that I'm learning right now, doing some writing, doing some stretching, just a bunch of stuff that I have to knock out tonight. So I'm going to end the video here. I hope you enjoyed hearing my recommendations, my favorites, and the books that I'm looking forward to reading in the months to come. I will see you on Thursday for another festive day in the life, and of course tune in tomorrow to catch Florence's video for day 6 of Vlogmas. Good night, everybody!